So yes, now okay. So to round out our evening today, our program tonight, we will be giving our review of the movie. What was it 1969?
1968.
1968.
68.
1968 production of The Producers, starring Gene Wilder and Max. Oh no, not Max. God, what was his name? Zero something. Zero
Uh,
Morto.
yeah, he's a guy from like Fiddler in the Roof,
Yeah.
and various stage plays.
Yes, it's a star-studded. Well, for that time,
Zero
it was
Mostel.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was for that time it was a star-studded affair, and it tells a story of a man by the name of Max something.
Bialystok.
Bialystok. There, that's right. He's like this down and out producer who kind of like scams little old ladies out of their out of their inheritance. He woos them. He woos them, and he's kind of hit the skids as of late, and then. I forget, like some production company or some theater that he's worked with in the past sends over an accountant to look over his books. And the accountant is played by Gene Wilder, and he finds a discrepancy of $2,000 because Max, put on who received $60,000 to put on a show, but only used up $58,000. So there's a discrepancy of $2,000, which should have gone back to like the investor or whatever or whoever helped him put on the production. And so that gives him the brilliant idea. And and then the accountant Leo Bloom, I believe it was. He starts kind of thinking about because Max asks him to hide the $2,000, and then that gets the gears turning, and he was thinking, he's like, man, you could make a fortune off of a crappy production than out of a really good one.
Right.
And so that is what kicks off the story, and Max and Leo, they try to, they decide that they were going to put on a stinker of a show, like the absolute worst show. Like it won't go beyond the first night. And so they're pouring over scripts, and they find a real gem called "Springtime for Hitler."
Oh God, it's so great.
Yeah, written by probably a former German soldier, probably maybe even an SS officer, and
Yep.
and so so they buy the rights to the script, and then they go and they hire a director, and they put out a casting call for the show. And a whole like cast of characters shows up, and I think we'll get into it a little bit after the synopsis. And so, and then there's like this montage of Max going and kind of bilking like these older ladies for money, so he could put on the show. And he's offering them all sorts of outlandish percentages of like of the show or of the take. And and then like I think he asked Leo like, oh, how much of a percentage have we given out? It's like, well, we only give out 100%, but we've given out over 2,000% of the show.
It was 25,000% that they ended up selling of the play.
Right. And so so they go and put on this what they think is going to be a real crapper of a show. Ends up becoming this huge hit, and like the reality of it, kind of sinks in, hits them hard like a Mack truck, just pow, and they're like discussing like their options, and then of course, what is it? The German guy that wrote the play, he's none too happy because it became kind of like a farce. People, after like the first musical number, people were about to like leave because like how what kind of bad taste is this making a play that celebrates Nazi Germany, but then all of a sudden like the play goes on and then and then people are starting to find it humorous, and then it become this huge, and everyone starts begins to love it because they think that it was supposed to be a comedy. But
Right.
yeah, so Max, Leo, and the German guy, they plan on blowing up the theater. Max and Leo want it blown up so like they don't have, so they're not on the hook for paying all their investors or whatever. And the German guy just wants to get revenge because he thought that it was the actors that made his work uh,
A joke.
a joke. And so they, plan to blow it up, but then things go awry. Um, they nearly end up blowing themselves up, but they survive and they are sent to prison where, what is it? Uh,
They're kind of doing the same thing. They're
yeah,
creating another
it's
play.
like a tiger can't change its stripes, so neither can these guys, and they, they're doing the same scam, but just in prison. And they're
Yeah,
getting all the
Prisoners of Love was the name of it.
inmates to fund this musical, and like again they're like offering all these outlandish percentages of of the profits,
Right.
and so yeah. I thought I thought it was a good movie. I thought it was very enjoyable. It was a little jarring for me because I think the performances, I felt they were a little bit like they're basically transplanting like a stage performance onto a film, and so like it was a little bit jarring. But once like I kind of got used to it, I didn't mind it so much. Um, I think Gene Wilder is just a really talented comedic actor,
Oh, he
and
is. Yeah.
you know, kind of like I, put him on, I put him up, Gene Wilder, and then like other like kind of other comedic actors like John Ritter. John Ritter was a tremendously brilliant
Fantastic.
comedic actor, like especially like physical comedy. He was just brilliant. So like I put those two
Yep.
guys at the same level, just in terms of their performance, like the performances that they can give.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
yeah, it was really surprised. Yeah, it was really interesting. Like because there were some actors that I didn't even realize they were like Mr. Belvedere. The actor that played Mr. Belvedere was in the movie.
That's right. He
Yeah,
was.
he was the director that they tapped to direct the show.
Yeah. I forget. I always forget that, but yeah, he the what was his characters? It was Roger Debris.
Right, Roger Debris, who but the actor Christopher Hewitt. Yeah,
Yeah.
in the late '80s, he had a hit show called Mr. Belvedere. He played a British butler who worked for like this middle class family in Pittsburgh.
Yep.
And yeah, it was one of my favorite shows growing up.
Yeah.
And
It was a good show.
yeah, it was a fun show, and just like seeing him, like even like younger too, it was like I was like, I know who this guy is, and then I'd like go and do like a Google search, and I was like, oh, holy crap, it's Mr. Belvedere.
Yeah. Um. Well, personally for me, this is one of my. I would probably say that this is probably one of my favorite comedies.
Mm-hmm.
It's right up there. It's between this and Young Frankenstein.
Oh,
Maybe because
Young
I've watched this.
Frankenstein, yeah, I love Young
Yeah.
Frankenstein.
So, but maybe because I've watched this a little bit more recently, like this is kind of taking the lead. I just think the the premise of the film is it's kind of ridiculous and crazy, and all the characters are a little bit over the top. But I like that they're all a little bit crazy. There's a lot of good physical comedy. Just the quick wit of all the characters are really great. I've always loved Gene Wilder. I think he's one of the great comedic actors of all time. And but even above all that, above Gene Wilder's character, above Israel Mostel's character, is the character of Lorenzo Saint Dubois, who ends up becoming the lead. Plays Hitler.
He got the lead role of Hitler.
Who is one of the most ridiculous characters in the show.
He really is.
Or in the movie. And just this, the prototypical, like, kind of free love hippie, man.
Yeah, kind of like mix of beatnik and hippie.
Yeah. And it's like, he has his whole, like, performance he does with his groupies. When he's performing for the
when he's auditioning for the show. He's auditioning for the show, and then it was funny because he was like, I think they were like making references to like Warhol because he wore like this can of like Campbell's soup on a chain around his neck.
Yeah, that's right.
And so just think of it's like mix beatnik and hippie, and you get like this guy. And it was funny. Did you mention that his initials make up LSD?
I was gonna get to that, but so he's like, my name is my name. Oh man, it's Lorenzo Saint Dubois, but my friends call me LSD. You dig? It's kind of it's one of the so crazy.
Right. And and just before we came on, me and Robert both remarked at how we believe that Robin Williams was inspired by this character, because a lot of the characters, like mannerisms and the way he spoke, were reminiscent of Robin Williams.
Yeah, I can say that. So the character of LSD was played by Dick Shawn, and I can't say for sure that that Robin Williams was inspired by this particular character, but it would not surprise me in the slightest, just on the way his quick wit and character change and how he did things, both the physical and the spoken comedy of the character.
Right.
It definitely had a lot of Robin Williams flair to it. So it would not surprise me that Robin Williams was inspired by Dick Shawn's representation of LSD. And the funny thing is, like, that's the guy that essentially ruined Bialystok and Bloom's their scheme, because the first act of Springtime for Hitler, you see the audience where they're just in disbelief of like, what in the fuck is this? This is horrific, as they should. And when the second act comes, there's a few people that just leave in disgust. And even before the second act comes on, there's people that are getting ready they're storming out. And then you have Lorenzo come on to play as Hitler, and he's just the most over the top, makes Hitler look like the complete buffoon. It's like, Sieg Heil, man. Sieg Heil. Yeah, Sieg Heil, baby. And he just comes off of this most flamboyantly, ridiculous Hitler. And
he doesn't try to.
It's like, I see what they're doing. It's a comedy. Oh man,
right, and that's the change, because the crowd sees this ridiculous portrayal of Adolf Hitler, and they're like, oh, it's a comedy, okay, and then then their sensibilities are like, okay, let's see what this is about, and then everyone is just like rolling laughing because they find it so hilarious.
Yeah, so I thought it was just it's one of those great, just to me, this is just one of those great comedies that is definitely worth watching. And if you watch this, I obviously I highly pump up the original, but if you want to watch, there was a remake that was done in 2005.
Right, with Matthew Broderick, Nathan Lane, Will Ferrell.
Will Ferrell. Yeah, and I had to say that I've been noted to say that I don't like a lot of remakes and stuff, but even the remake was just it was fantastic too, in its own right. They recast the movie very well. I'll say that.
Mm.
And yeah, I had to say this is one of my favorite comedies of all time. It's probably one of my favorite films of all time, and I can't speak highly enough of this. I've seen this movie probably about 30 times, and it still to this day makes me laugh out loud. And it's not a very long movie. It's only like what?
It was like an hour and a half.
Yeah, hour and a half. Not a very long run time.
No.
So
yeah, no. Surprisingly, it went by very quickly.
Yeah, it's very fast paced. It's you'll be surprised how quick it moves.
Mm.
There's not really a dull or boring moment in the film.
Right. There's not a lot of downtime, as it were. All right. I think is there anything else you wanted to add before we get into our rating?
Well, I definitely the other what was it, the secretary that they hire later on is before the start of the show, and Max Bialystock is kind of throwing around some of the money that he got from the investors, and so he hires a super hot Swedish secretary that barely speaks English,
right?
And it's like, oh man, and well, Lee Meredith is the one who plays in the original. Actually, I'm sorry. We said the movie was in '68. It's actually '67. So we're a year off. Sorry about that. But yeah, her Lee Meredith's representation of Ulla is who her full name, her full character's name in this movie is Ulla Inga Hansen Benson Janssen Tallen Holland Svaden Swanson Bloom. So it's some kind of crazy, but yeah, her definitely a very attractive character and very funny too.
Super hot.
Like it's very funny.
Yeah.
It
was great. Yeah, she was like basically a go-go dancer. And it was funny because yeah, it's like and she dances very much like in like that kind of like 60s kind of way. Just watch if you've ever seen an episode of Scooby Doo when they're like dancing, just like kind of picture that.
Yeah. Yep. It's exactly right. It's like, Ulla, go to work. Go to
right,
work.
Yeah, she goes. Yeah, her go to work is like putting on the record and then start like dancing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, we have sex now.
Oh,
no sex.
Oh, yeah.
I'm ruined. It's just so. Oh. The interaction between the characters is so great. Like all the characters how they interact with one another. It's fantastic. This is one of those like even in the remake, the chemistry between the actors is fantastic. So, that's all I have to say about the producers.
All right. So let us get on with the rating.
For me, this is 5 stars all the way.
5 stars for Robert. Okay. 5 stars for Robert. I will give this I'll just come under you and say 4. I mean, at that, I don't like, I mean, Robert, he really loves this movie. I mean, I like this movie, just as, I like this movie just fine. But, I'm kind of reviewing it for those people, who aren't really into older movies, and who might find like when you first are introduced to these characters, you might find their performances a little bit jarring because again, it's like the acting is like very kind of over the top, and it feels very much like a stage production that someone just happened to film. So like
Yeah.
it's like they're doing a play, but then they just happen to be filming it also, and so it was a little bit jarring for that. But again, that notwithstanding, it was still a good movie. It was still very fun.